25 questions, 60 minutes to complete. It'll be a combination of multiple choice and true false. Okay, so and when in the course of doing this kind of review, I'll record it and then I'll post it to YouTube. So you guys, if there's anything that you miss along the way, you can go back and look. Remember, Monday you would need to complete it by 11:59. We'll do these chats weekly. Wednesday 7 o'clock. I'll speak a little bit about course content, and then we'll talk about things, and then I'll go and let you guys take off, and then if anybody else wants to stick around and talk to me, I'll use the latter part of the time as my office hours. With that being said, remember, our first chat is due tonight. Our first discussion question is due tonight, so make sure you answer it. Then what'll happen is I'm going to expect you guys to go in by Friday and answer two of your classmates. And kind of maybe give some either criticisms or compliments about their responses, and then I'll grade them on Saturday. Also, you have your second discussion assignment is going to be due on Friday, so remember to finish that and turn it in. Same thing, you'll have until Sunday to respond to your classmates, and then Monday I'll grade the second portion. All right, so remember that. We have a quiz coming up, and I think we're pretty good about staying on track. I appreciate you all going in and answering that first question with regards to a little bit about yourself. It's always good to know who I have in my classes. This is going to be a mix of both of my sections this summer. So, right now we only have 20 people here. That seems like it's going to be manageable. If I find out that some of the things that I'm going over in there might be too many people, I'll split it up. But for now, let's go ahead and do one session so I don't have to keep repeating myself. But yeah, like I said, if it gets to the point where it's not logistically possible, then I'll split the classes up. Also record these, so if there is a Wednesday where you can't make it, I'll record it. Usually I'll be able to post it by Thursday morning. So if you miss a section and you can't come, then you always have that video to take a look at. So before I get started in talking about the midterm, are there any questions about the class so far? I think you guys got a pretty good handle on some of the things going on in class. So if you could just either type it in the chat or hop on a microphone, whatever you want to do. Any questions, concerns, or comments?
I did want to check. I was late to the introduction part.
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to make sure I'm not dropped, am I?
Oh, no.
Okay.
That was more for people that didn't sign in at all. So, there's people. I think I have everybody in. I think everybody signed in. So, we have to clear our rosters pretty soon. So I just want to make sure whoever wants to be in the class can be in the class. So I haven't dropped anybody yet. There's a question about extra credit. Yeah, there's a question about extra credit. Possibly I'll offer some extra credit. We'll see as we go along. If there's a need, we can always do that. So one thing that I kind of wanted to detail in Sunday for the Wednesday discussions, you have to respond by Friday. For the Friday discussions, you have to respond by Sunday. Okay, so that's easy enough. Easy way to remember. So, we're going to have, like I said, those short 6 quizzes each week or each Monday, except for the last quiz. The last quiz will be on a Friday, the last Friday of class. What the first midterm essay is going to be, it's going to be about the system of checks and balances, right? And, James Madison came up with an idea to kind of avoid tyranny in the majority. We need some semblance of checks and balances where one section of government or one branch of government is ensuring that the other branches don't violate or don't have too much power, right? Remember, in these cases, each branch of government is supposed to have equally dispersed power. Now, as we go along in this in the course of this class, we're going to find out instances where there might be institutions that might be stronger than the others. That wasn't done intentionally. That's just kind of how something evolved out of the separation of powers doctrine. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the courts. But as part of your midterm essay, I'm going to want you guys to write a 3 to 5 page paper detailing 5 checks and balances that are out there for the government to use. If we go in to look at this PowerPoint right here, if you see the PowerPoint here, what we're going to take a look at is kind of a little bit of a talking point first here. So let me get this set up. Let's take a look. So, in this whole kind of the separation of powers question that we have, basically what this is saying is that, we have a system of government that was originally designed in Federalist 51, where Madison thought, and this was a very apropos statement that he made, was that if men were angels, no government would be necessary, right? So in a sense, what he was saying is everybody was equal, everybody was good, we wouldn't need government. But unfortunately, not everybody's good. Sometimes we're not treated equally. Therefore, we need some type of a balance to prevent one branch of government from dominating the others. All right? So when we look at this, each major decision in a decision-making body is chosen by a different constituency. So we choose the House of Representatives, we choose the Senate. Together they make up the Congress. They have checks on the president. We indirectly elect the president. He has a check on the legislative branch, and we elect the president, and in turn that president nominates members of the courts. They're confirmed by the Senate. So in each semblance of this kind of duties, each branch of government will have specific duties that are needed in order to effectively counterbalance each other's powers. Now, some of the problems with the separation of powers doctrine is it can create gridlock, right? When we talk about the executive branch, we're going to see that a veto is just as good as a threat of a veto. So if Congress passes a law and the president doesn't like it, he doesn't have to sign it into law. He can veto it. But like I said, that threat of veto can also be just as effective as a veto. So that veto that the president has is a check, right? And at times it's easier maybe to keep things the way they are until in order than to enact new legislation. So sometimes, like I said, it's easier just to keep laws how they are without worrying about having to go through the legislative process and worry about the president vetoing it or worrying about the courts declaring it to be unconstitutional. So these are all checks that we have. So we look at the executive branch so we have the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch, right? President, courts, Congress, all supposed to act independently of each other. So the executive branch has their own powers that are vested to them. The president can issue an executive order, right? Basically, an executive order is a order that is given to the bureaucratic branch of government or all the departments and offices under the president, where they try to implement some type of policy. And on this slide here, I have a couple of examples. Trump's original travel ban, the ban that he put in place from those 7 countries that were on the no good list back in 2017. He placed a ban on travel from those. It was through an executive order, meaning that he gave direction to the Department of Homeland Security to not allow travel from these 7 different countries. Another one is the internment of Japanese Americans that happened in 1942, which was Executive Order 9066. Now, for you Star Wars fans, you might know what Order 66 is. I'm a big Star Wars nut, but Order 66 was the order to wipe out the Jedi. But Executive Order 9066 is different. It was the order from FDR to put Japanese Americans into internment camps. So they have the same weight as laws, and they can be checked as well. Right? So basically, this is what the president can do as far as checks and balances. They can appoint federal judges, cabinet, department heads, but these have to be confirmed by the Senate. The legislative branch also has checks and balances, right? If a president vetoes a bill, if you can get 2/3 of Congress to override that veto, then that legislation will become part of law, will become law. But look at 2/3 vote. 2/3 vote can be very problematic to get because that's 66% of Congress. And you need 66% of Congress to agree in order to override a presidential veto. This happens so infrequently. I think in the course of our history, it's only happened about 96 times where a president's veto has been overridden. So kind of think about that in context of our history. How long has the United States Constitution been in effect? Been in effect since 1787, right? So since then, only 96 presidential vetoes have been overridden. So it kind of puts a little bit more of a clarity to that figure that I'm trying to get across to you. They also approve presidential appointments, which we talked about. The Senate will do that. We'll talk about kind of the fact that Supreme Court justices are appointed and the Senate has to confirm them, and we'll talk about some of the things and some of the politics that goes into that. That'll be later in the summer. They can impeach federal officers, which we saw in the early part of this year when Trump was impeached. That is probably one of the stronger powers that the legislative branch has over the executive branch. And the judicial branch can be checked by proposing a constitutional amendment. So basically, say Congress passes a law, the president signs it, right? So it becomes a law. Soon after that, it is challenged, and the judicial branch decides that it is unconstitutional. That is not part of what, kind of the interpretation of the Constitution says. One way the legislative branch can overturn a judicial decision is by making a constitutional amendment, and this is very, 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 very difficult to do, and we'll talk a little bit about numbers in a bit. The judicial branch, they can rule decisions by legislative and the executive branch unconstitutional. Remember how I mentioned this Trump travel ban? Originally, it was challenged in the courts, and parts of it were found to be unconstitutional. So that's kind of our system of checks and balances right there. This power was derived from a case called Marbury versus Madison. This might be a case some of you have heard about. This is called power of judicial review, where the courts have the power to determine whether or not a law is constitutional. And in my opinion, this is the greatest power in government, and I'll go through and make my argument in a little bit. And like I said, one of the few ways to check decisions made by the courts is through a constitutional amendment. So how do we amend the Constitution, right? So in order to make a constitutional amendment, you need 2/3 of Congress to vote in favor, and you need 3/4 of all state legislatures to vote in favor. So if we break those numbers down, you need 2/3 of Congress, 353 out of 535, or 66%, and 3/4 of the state legislatures, 38 states out of the 50. You need to have them all come together and vote in the affirmative for a constitutional amendment. Now, the reason I say that this is difficult, look at those numbers, 66% and 75%. I mean, we have a hard of enough time getting to 51% in a lot of our legislative making type situations here. So it's very, very difficult. In fact, that it's so difficult that You know, we have 27 amendments to the Constitution since 1787. 10 were all done at one shot. So we've had 17 since 1791. And one of them was overturned, prohibition of alcohol. So as you can see, making a constitutional amendment is very, very difficult. So I'm saying once the Supreme Court comes and makes a decision, it is very, very hard to change it, right? And this is one of the ways to change it is through a constitutional amendment. On Monday, on the day our class started, the Supreme Court decided that as part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, LGBTQIA groups are going to be considered a protected class now, meaning that employers can't discriminate or can't refuse to hire people based off of their sexual orientation. One way to overturn that Supreme Court decision is by a constitutional amendment, and I don't see that happening. So, do you all have any questions about this? I'm going to want you guys to write a quick 3 to 5 page paper about this. Give me 5 different checks and balances, and then, write it in essay format and send it over to me, and I will grade it. Any questions so far? You can either type in the chat or jump on the mic. It's up to you. If not, we'll go on.
For the paper, is there a required amount of references? I'm sorry, I might have missed that.
Yeah, anywhere from 2 to 3.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to get too hardcore about references. I do want you to use references. I want you to cite, but I don't expect you to go to about 10 different sources just to get this question answered. Any other questions? Okay, let's take a quick look at the Constitution. I know part of the reading this week was to look at the Constitution. Let me get it up here real quick. Hold on. Okay, so right now I'm going to share with you a website that has the Constitution. Now, what I really, really want you guys to get out of this class is to be able to understand your rights. Right? What is it? I mean, we could probably spend a whole semester talking about the Constitution and some of the things that it does for us. But just right off the bat, if we look at this, so when we go through each institution, whether it's the legislative branch, the executive branch, or the judicial branch, we'll refer to the parts of the Constitution that set out the responsibilities for those institutions. But what I wanted to go down is look at the amendments really quickly. And what I wanted you guys to kind of understand was that some of these amendments, still stand the test of time, right? And, with all these protests that we have going on, there's questions about the First Amendment. What does the First Amendment entail? So let's take a look at it, right? So the First Amendment obviously says that we have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. That freedom of speech doctrine is kind of hairy when you think about it, because not all speech is protected. If you engage in hate speech, if you have a speech if you say something that creates a clear and present danger, that isn't protected by freedom of speech, right? If I come on here and say a bunch of racist and misogynistic stuff, can MiraCosta College bump me the hell out of here? Absolutely. We're starting to see people lose their jobs just with some of these protests that have come out in the response to, the kind of the George Floyd type protests that we saw, where you hear people making comments on Twitter or even being recorded, and I guess the thing now is to record women and call them Karen. I guess I'm not quite up to all this and what some of these slangs mean, but I guess a lot of these people are getting caught and being put on blast, as you say, where you might make questionable decisions about somebody or making a comment about them and it's being recorded. But yeah, you could definitely see instances where people can get fired for some of the things that they say. So what I'm trying to say in this is that we have freedom of speech, but it's certain limits. We could say whatever we want, but there's definitely going to be consequences. Okay, Article 2, Amendment 2, probably the most controversial amendment that we have, the right to bear arms. So if we look at this, one of the questions about it is, and one of the age-old questions that come out of this is, what would you consider to be a well-regulated militia? How would we interpret militias? Is that a group of citizens? Is that law enforcement? Or is that military? I don't know. That would be something a Supreme Court justice would be able to need to come in and talk to us about. But yeah, that's the Second Amendment. The Third Amendment, don't worry about. The Fourth Amendment protects us against illegal search and seizure. Later in the summer, we'll look at a Supreme Court case called Matt versus Ohio that addresses that, meaning that if the police go and search your property or go in and try maybe even search your person, they need a warrant to do that. In order to establish a warrant, you need something called probable cause, or the belief that there might be a crime being committed. And in turn, also, you have to have an order signed by a judge to let you know what can and can't be searched. The Fifth Amendment is another important one. Remember, if we're ever arrested or we're ever in trouble, we have the right to not incriminate ourselves. We have the right of due process, which I think is the most important right that we have here in the United States, due process of the law, meaning that we're all treated equally under the law and that we all are entitled to a trial. Article 6, Amendment 6 basically says that we're entitled to a speedy and public trial by a jury of our peers. We have a right to confront our witnesses. We have a right to have an attorney speak for us. Article 7 basically says that we have the right as citizens to sue each other civilly if we need to. So if you go out and you ask me to come and mow your lawn and we agree to it and you say you're going to pay me $1,000, if you come in and pay me $1,000 mow your lawn, I'll be there at 5 a.m. But say, for instance, for some reason I don't do it, but you've already paid me the money. We have a grievance. We have a tort that you could possibly sue off of. Article 8 basically says no excessive bail, no cruel and unusual punishment. This is where the death penalty gets argued a lot of the times. The 9th, don't worry about it. And the 10th, we'll go over the 10th a lot when we talk about federalism and how the powers that aren't delegated by the U.S., by the Constitution, and as long as it's not unconstitutional or prohibited by the states can do. And I use the analogy of, or the example of the marijuana laws here in California, where marijuana is legal here in California, but it's illegal at the federal level. And I always going to want you guys to remember that at the federal level, their laws are always going to trump state laws. Another important one, and this is something that we also talk about in the federalism, is the 14th Amendment. Basically, the 14th Amendment says that we are supposed to be treated equally in front of the law, and we're all subject to due process. And states cannot infringe on that. So there's other articles which we'll talk about, other amendments that we'll talk about, but those are the most important ones. 18 was overturned, so we'll talk a little bit about that, but remember the 18th Amendment was overturned. That was the amendment that prohibited the manufacturing, selling, and transportation of liquor. Okay, so are there any questions? And remember, one thing that I want you guys to get out of the Bill of Rights is all of these amendments were put into place in order to protect our rights from the government. So if you go back and look at all those 10 amendments that we just talked about, those are the Bill of Rights, and those were put into place to protect us from the government. Right? Are there any questions? Questions, concerns, or comments? Okay, so that's the Constitution. We'll keep referring back to it during the course of the summer. What I also wanted to show you guys was, let me get it up here. Okay, we have a quiz coming up on Monday. So inside the modules of week 1, I have this study guide, right? And this study guide should be able to help you with getting ready for the midterm. I mean, for the quiz. So the first couple of questions deal with direct democracy, right? And direct democracy, as we know, that includes the initiative, the referendum, and the recall. Make sure that you know the percentages that are needed to pass these for petitions. So if you know that you wanted to do a statute initiative or initiative that creates a new law, know the percentage of signatures that you need to get it on the ballot. All right? There's going to be 2. There's going to be if you want to do a constitutional amendment, you need 8% of the people that voted in the last gubernatorial election. If you're going to do a statute, you need 5%. And generally, a lot of our issues need a 51% vote to pass, or a simple majority rule. Now, if there's a new tax being involved, that's a little bit harder criteria to reach. That's a 66% criteria. Okay, know what elite theory is. Remember, elite theory basically says that we all have elites that run our system, and they are the few with power, their values, behaviors, and their demographics. Know what pluralism is. Remember what pluralism is. I think in the video I said pluralism is a lot like Wakanda. And even though that is a fictional place, if you look at the first, few scenes in Black Panther, there is a scene where all the tribes come together and are talking about public policy issues. That's a perfect illustration of pluralism, where people come in and bargain and choose what issues are important to them and to their people. So elites theory is a group of people making a decision for the greater whole. Pluralism is kind of the same thing, but in a sense you have more people involved and more people making and compromising and bargaining with issues. Okay, so remember Locke? We talked about John Locke. John Locke's beliefs that we were entitled to life, liberty, and property. And that part of that, when we talk about democracy, there's some things that are vital to the survival of democracy. One of the things is equality, right? We need to be all equal in front of the law. We all have to have equality of opportunity. That's another thing. And then all our vote has to count the same. One person, one vote. Talked about the New Jersey plan. Remember, the New Jersey plan was a plan that was set up to try to determine representation in Congress. That originally called for each state to have one vote. The Virginia plan was a little bit different. The Virginia plan sought that to try to kind of form a parliamentary form of government. And neither of those plans were palatable, so they got together and they made what was called the Connecticut Compromise, where we have our 2-house legislature now, a separate executive and a separate judicial branch. one of the reasons that the Constitution was laid out was there was some weaknesses with the Articles of Confederation. You know, at that time, the Articles of Confederation didn't have any executive or judicial branches a part of it. The state governors were weak at the time. And the federal government didn't really have the power to tax or regulate trade. And as we know, taxation and regulation is the way that our government generates revenue. Know what popular consent is? Know what the social contract is? Basically, remember the social contract says that we give up some type of power or some type of right, and in turn the government protects us. Know what salutary neglect was? It was a term coined by Sir Edmund Burke, who said that at first, prior to all the problems of the Revolution, England would kind of practice healthy neglect toward the colonies, where they weren't paying attention much to what the colonies were doing. And then after that, they started to take a little bit deeper look when they were trying to generate revenue. Know how slavery was dealt with by the Constitution? You know, the 3/5 compromise. Slaves counted as 3/5 of a person for representation only. They had agreed not to end the slave trade until 1908. And there had to be a requirement of returning runaway slaves. On number 14, Federalist 51. I only want you guys to know Federalist 51. Don't worry about 10 or 73. So just know 51. Checks and balances. We just talked about it. So kind of understand that what the system of checks and balances involves here in the United States. Like what powers that the president has as far as passing a law. How Congress can determine whether or not they want to, or the Senate more specifically, can determine who they want to confirm as a presidential nominee. And basically know that each power or each branch of government is supposed to run independently of each other, and they're supposed to be equal. Know the different types of colonies. Know the royal colony, the charter colony, and the proprietary colony. And know that the charter colony was the basis of our Constitution. Know what tyranny of the majority is? We talked a little bit about that. Tyranny of the majority basically says that that if a law affects the minority adversely or it violates their rights, even though the majority wants it, the minority still has protection in the courts. And know how we amend the Constitution. We talked a little bit about that. Are there any questions, concerns, or comments? Yeah, the new tax is proposed by the people. It's actually a 51% criteria. But I'm going to ask you guys just to know the 66%, because if it's passed by a citizen, it's a 51% criteria, but that's still being kind of put in motion a bit. It's still kind of trying to be interpreted a bit better. So just know 66% for now. Any questions, concerns, or comments? So if you get the study guide and fill it out and have it ready when you do the exam, you should be okay. Or the quiz. Yeah, this will be available. probably tomorrow morning. I imagine this is going to be a pretty big file, so it does take some time, and I've been having problems with uploading some of my content to YouTube. And if you want to take the test before Monday, let me know, and I can make that arrangement. So it'll be up tomorrow morning at the latest. So I think each Wednesday we'll do this. You can come on and ask me questions. I'll do a mini lecture. I think this talk about the Supreme Court and the Congress and the executive branch all kind of helped out for your next paper that's going to be due. 8% for a constitutional amendment, because remember, in Constitution we can make an amendment to the Constitution here in California. California has its own Constitution. We as the citizens have the ability to amend it. So for the tax question, just remember 66%, statutes 5%, and constitutional amendment is 8%. I don't want to keep you guys too long. No, signatures aren't required for a referendum. A referendum basically is when a legislative body puts out a thing for people to vote on. So yeah, there's no petition needed. Now there's a petition needed for a recall, but I don't expect you guys to know that because that is a very, very involved process. So I know we're in the middle, we're at the beginning of summer almost. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. We'll do this next Wednesday. I'll have something prepared to talk about. And then we'll go from there. I'll hang on here for the next 10 to 15 minutes in case you have to ask me any questions. But for now, that's all I got. Like I said, we'll come back next Wednesday and we'll discuss other issues. Was this helpful? Did this thing help you all? If you could type in yes or no in the box, I'd appreciate it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys go. Go ahead and go out and have fun. I mean, there's no place we can go yet, but enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.